B'siyata d'shmai, we're going to learn Rosh Hashanah Daf Lamed Hey. We're going to start 11 lines from the bottom of Daf Lamed Daled Omid Beis. Kashem sheshliach tzibur chayev kach kol yochid v'yochid v'chulu. This takes us back to the final statement in the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Gimel Omid Beis. The Tanakhama say that in the same way as the shliach tzibur is chayev to daven musaf and say the brachas, kach kol yochid v'yochid chayev, so to every individual is chayev to daven on his own. Rabbi Gamliel in the Mishnah argues and says that shliach tzibur moitzi es Rabbi midei chivason. By listening to the shliach tzibur, then all the people, the community who is listening, or we'll soon see if they have to listen or not, but the rabbim are yoitza, they've fulfilled their requirement. Says the Gemara, Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Amru loyle Rabbi Gamliel. They said to Rabbi Gamliel, you Rabbi Gamliel say that the shliach tzibur can always be moitzi the rabbim. Lidvarecha lomar tzibur mispalelim. So why does the public, why do they daven at all? Just to have a chazaras hashat, only have the shliach tzibur do the Shemona Esrei, and not all the people on their own. Omar lehen. So Rabbi Gamliel answered them back, in order to give the shliach tzibur time to arrange the tefillah, because they had to do it by heart, they didn't have machzerim like we have today, in order that in his mind he should be well prepared, to give him time to prepare the tefillah, he would have the time whilst the others were davening their Shemona Esrei, what we call the quiet Shemona Esrei. Omar lein Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel said to the Chachomim, L'divreichem, according to you, that every individual has to daven themselves. Lama shliach tzibur yered lifnei ateva. Why do we need the shliach tzibur at all to go to the ark, to go to the omud and daven before everybody else? In any case, every person has to daven on his own. Amrullah, the Chachomim said to Rabbi Gamliel, Kidei lahoitzias she'enei baki. You're right. Anybody who's able to daven on their own cannot rely on the shliach tzibur, has to daven on their own. But you have some people who are ignorant. They can't read, they can't daven, they don't know the tefillah. Either they didn't have a siddur, they didn't know it by heart, whatever it's going to be, they can't daven on their own. They can't daven on their own, then even they agree that the shliach tzibur can be moitzi them. Omar lehem. So Rabbi Gamliel responded, I maintain that this shliach tzibur, in the same way as somebody who cannot daven on his own can be yotze from the shliach tzibur, can fulfill his requirement by listening to the shliach tzibur, so too those who can daven, they can also listen to the shliach tzibur, and instead of davening on their own, they can listen to the shliach tzibur and be yotze. Omar Rabbi bar bar Chana Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan has said an interesting thing, that moidim chachomim Rabbi Gamliel, that at some point the Chachomim agreed to Rabbi Gamliel, there's no more machlekes, and even the Chachomim agree that the shliach tzibur can be moitzi everybody. The Rav Omar, however, Rav argued with Rabbi bar bar Chana in the name of Rabbi Yochanan and said that daini machlekes, no, they didn't agree. It's still an argument between the Chachomim and Rabbi Gamliel. Continues the Gemara. Sham'a Reb Chia b'rei de Rabbi bar Nachmani. Reb Chia, the son of Rabbi bar Nachmani, Reb Chia heard what Rabbi bar bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. That what? That the Chachomim are moided to Rabbi Gamliel. Ozal omro l'shmaita kamed Rav Dimi bar Chinana. And Reb Chia said to Rav Dimi, and he told him that Rabbi bar bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that the Chachomim agreed to Rabbi Gamliel. Omar le, Rav Dimi said to Reb Chia, Hachi Omar Rav. Rav, however, argued with what you're telling me in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and we actually saw this Rav 2 lines earlier. Adaini machleikas, it's still a machleikas between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachomim. The Chachomim didn't agree with Rabbi Gamliel. Omar le, Reb Chia said back to Rav Dimi that Rabbi bar Chana nami, that Rabbi bar Chana also, Hachi Koma, when he said over what Rabbi Yochanan said, Ki Omar Rabbi Yochanan laha shmaita, when he said that Rabbi Yochanan held that the Chachomim agreed to Rabbi Gamliel, then he said, Rabbi bar Chana himself said that if legalei Rish Lakish, that Rish Lakish argued with Rabbi Yochanan, va'omar adaini machleikas, and maintained that it's still a machleikas. Like we saw in the name of Rav, Rish Lakish also didn't agree with Rabbi Yochanan and held it was still a machleikas between the Chachomim and Rabbi Gamliel. Now the Gemara is asking, can it possibly be that according to Rabbi Yochanan, the Chachomim agreed with the Rabbi Gamliel and the Shliach Tzibur is moitzi everybody? V'amar Rav Chana Tzipora, Rav Chana of Tzipuri said, Omer Rabbi Yochanan said explicitly in the name of the same Rabbi Yochanan, Hilchasa Rabban Gamliel, the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. If the Chachamim agreed to Rabban Gamliel, then it's not the halacha like Rabban Gamliel, there's no machlekes anymore. Hilchasa, if you're saying the term Hilchasa, Mechlal de Pligi, it seems to denote that the Chachamim argued with Rabban Gamliel. So answers the Gemara, Kisolik Rav Abba Miyame, when Rav Abba, who was out at sea on some journey, came back, Pirush explained it as follows: Moidim chachomim leben Gamliel bebrachos Rosh Hashanah v'shel Yom Kippurim. That when Rabbi Yochanan said that the chachomim agreed to Rabban Gamliel, that was only regarding Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There, the chachomim now agreed and said that the shliach tzibur can be moitzi everybody. But when Rabbi Yochanan said halacha Rabban Gamliel, and that means the chachomim argue mechlal de pligi bebrachos to kol hashana, the whole year round, a regular Shemona Esrei, a regular tefillah, there the chachomim do not agree with Rabban Gamliel, and they say that anyone who can daven has to daven themselves. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the chachomim agreed to Rabban Gamliel that the shliach tzibur can be moitzi everybody. Says the Gemara Eini, V'omer Rav Chana Tzipira, Rav Chana from Tzipira says Omer Rabbi Yochanan, said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and we saw this on the last line of the previous Amud. Just on the last line of the previous Amud, it only says Hilchas Rabban Gamliel. That Rabbi Yochanan said the halacha was like Rabban Gamliel. But now we're seeing that what he actually said was halacha Rabban Gamliel, bebrachos shel Rosh Hashanah v'shel Yom Kippurim, explicitly said regarding Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur also the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, which seems to be that the Chachamim who argue with Rabban Gamliel argue with Rabban Gamliel even on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. In which case the contradiction comes back. Rabbi Yochanan said that Moedim Chachamim Rabban Gamliel when the whole year round not, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur also not, because Rabbi Yochanan said that halacha is like Rabban Gamliel by Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It must be the arguing there as well. The contradiction comes back. Ela Omer of Nachman by Yitzchok. The truth is there's two Chachomims. One Chachomim is called Reb Meir, and there's another Chachomim which is everybody else. Man Moedim, when Rabbi Yochanan said Moedim Chachomim Rabban Gamliel, he didn't mean everybody. He meant just Reb Meir. Reb Meir agreed to Rabban Gamliel. However, all the other Chachomim, they are the other Rabbanon. They argued all together, and they say that then they say that the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, and they argue the Rabban Gamliel that you can never be yotze from the shliach tzibur, even Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The Tanya we saw in the Brisa, brachos Rosh Hashanah v'shel Yom Kippurim, regarding the brachos of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We're talking about Yom Kippur of Yovel when they would say these Malchus Zechonis Shefris. Shliach Tzibur Moitzi Rabbi Midei Chivasoi Div Reb Meir. Reb Meir says the Shliach Tzibur can be Moitzi them, because that's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Moidim Chachamim Rabban Gamliel, that you can be moida at least regarding Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. The Chachamim argued and said no. Kashem sheshliach tzibur chayev kach kol yochid v'yochid chayev. Every individual who can daven has to daven on their own, and that's what the Rabbi Yochanan said. Halacha is like Rabban Gamliel and not like those Chachamim. And the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel by Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur also by Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur that the shliach tzibur can be moitzi everybody. So what we're left with now is that the whole year round, as Rabbi Abba said when he came back from the sea, that the whole year round, of course there's a machlokes, and everybody besides Rabban Gamliel, everybody holds that the yochid who can daven cannot rely on the shliach tzibur. The question is regarding Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So we saw that Reb Meir, when it says Moedim Chachamim Rabban Gamliel, and there Rabbi Abba explained Moedim is talking about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that's Reb Meir. And the other Chachamim, they said that even Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, not. And that's what we just saw here in the Brisa regarding Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that according to Reb Meir, everybody can be yotze from the shliach tzibur, and according to the Chachamim, not. According to Gamliel, even the whole year you can be yotze from the shliach tzibur, even somebody you can daven on their own. Asks the Gemara, Maishnohani, why should Rosh Hashanah be different to the tefillos of the whole year? Ilema is it mishum denafisha kroi, because there's lots of psukim that you mention. You mention the musaf of Rosh Hashanah, and the musaf of Rosh Chodesh, and the psukim of Malchus, and the psukim of Zechronis, and the psukim of Shofros. Is that the reason that because there's so many psukim, people are not so familiar with it, they could get confused, and therefore everybody can be yotze from the shliach tzibur. V'omer b'chananul omarav kivan she'omar. Since it says, as long as you say the words uv'seiroscha kosov leimoir, that it says it in psukim. Right, that means if you say, Rashi says, since he says, this is regarding the musaf, the musafin, that is, as long as you said, you don't need to say the psukim, I don't need to say the psukim of musafim. So certainly some of the psukim you don't have to mention. So why should that be a reason that you can be yotze from the shliach tzibur and not daven yourself? Elo mishum de'avshe brachas is because on Rosh Hashanah you've got many brachas. You don't just have the one bracha in the middle where you have to mention the musaf. You have 9 brachas. You have the long brachas and the brachas that we're not familiar with of Malchies, Zechronos and Shofros, and therefore since it's such long brachas with so many psukim in, therefore you can rely on the shliach tzibur more than the whole year, that somebody who knows how to daven cannot rely on the shliach tzibur. That seems to be how Rashi learns this Gemara. Continues the Gemara. Gufa, Omar of Chananul Omarav. We just saw now, Kivan she'omar of Seroscha Kosov Leimer, since as long as he says that the karbonos we want to bring in the Beis Hamikdash, as Rashi brought before, you don't need to actually say the psukim themselves. It's enough just to say in the tefillah that the karbonos that are brought are those that are mentioned in the Torah. Savur minei, that hani mili b'yochid, aval b'tzibur lo yitmar. He assumed that that's only true when you're davening on your own. But when you're davening with the tzibur, with the whole congregation, then it's not sufficient just to say U'v'seroscha kosov leimer as it says in the Torah without actually saying the psukim. Omer Rabbi Shua ben Levi, but Rabbi Shua ben Levi argued and said echad yochid ve'echad tzibur, even if you're davening but tzibur, kivan she'omar U'v'seroscha kosov leimer, since you've said these words U'v'seroscha kosov leimer, shuvei netzorich, if you don't say the psukim, you're still yotza. Continues the Gemara. Omer Rabbi Loza. La'olam yazdir odom tfilos. A person should always arrange the tefillah in his mind before davening them, so it should be clear. He should know what he's going to say and how he's going to say it. And only after that he should daven. Omer Rabbi Abba. Mistaber milsaj Rabbi Loza. It's probable that what Rabbi Loza said is only bebrachas Rosh Hashanah v'shel Yom Kippurim. It's only those brachas of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur v'shel Prokim and the Yomim Tovim that just come once every few months or once a year. But aval de kol Hashanah, but the brachas, the regular brachas of the regular day, the regular Shabbos and maybe even Rosh Chodesh, loy, there we can assume that you'll remember the tefillas and you don't need to arrange them before you daven. Asks the Gemara, Eini, v'ar Rav Yehuda masadit sleisei umatzlei. We know that Rav Yehuda, every time he davened the regular Shemoneh Esrei, he would first arrange the tefillah in his mind and then he would daven. That seems to be not like Reb Abba said. Answers the Gemara, Shani Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda was different because he only davened the regular normal Shemoneh Esrei once in 30 days. Given the mitlosin yomin, since every 30 days have a matzli, he would daven because he would review everything he ever learnt every month, and he was so immersed in Torah that in those generations at that time, people that were that engaged in Torah, even though they had to say Kriya Shema, they did not have to say the Shemoneh Esrei, and therefore Kaprokim Domi, for him, he only said the Shemoneh Esrei once in 30 days, therefore he had to arrange the Shemoneh Esrei in his mind before davening. But all the other people who daven every day do not need to. Omer of Acha bar Avira, Omer of Shimon Chasida, Poitor Hoyer Rabbi Gamliel afilu am shebesadis. Rabbi Gamliel, who said in the Mishnah that the Shliach Tzibur can be moitzi all the Yechidim, everybody, it's even the people who are not there listening to the Tefillah, even the people who are in the fields, the Shliach Tzibur, since those people, they're forced not to daven, they're forced to skip Tefillahs, they can't daven, they're busy working, whatever it is, the people in the fields, and they're not even coming to shul, the Shliach Tzibur is moitzi them. And it goes without saying that the people who are actually here listening to the Shliach Tzibur, that the Shliach Tzibur can be moitzi them, they don't need to say the Shemoneh Esrei on their own. Asks the Gemara, Adarabba, why are you saying v'loi mi boya, that it goes without saying the people who are here? On the contrary, Hani Anisi, the people in the fields, so they were forced to skip a tefillah, they had no choice. I can understand that the Shliach Tzibur should be moitzi them, should, so to speak, daven on their behalf. Hani, but the people who can come, Lo Anisi, they are not forced to skip a tefillah, so maybe the Shliach Tzibur will not daven on their behalf and they have to daven on their own. The Tani Abba Bereder Ben Yamin Barchia, Am She'achere Koyanim, Einom Bichlal Bracha. As we know, that Zaloch and Birchas Kohanim, that the Kohanim are giving their bracha to the people in front of them. And the people who are not here, the Amsha Basadis, they're giving them brachas as well. But the people who are here, and they could come and in front of the Kohanim, and they choose to stand behind the Kohanim, they will not get the bracha. So you see clearly that the people in the fields, it's easier for them to be represented, even though they're not there in person, more than the people who are there, but are they're not doing what they have to do. Eloki also Ravin Omer Yaakov Bar Idi Omer Shimon Chasida, he argued and said, Lo Ipota Rabbi Gamliel, when Rabbi Gamliel said the Shliach Tzibur is moitzi, is davening on behalf of all those who are not here in the fields, is Elo Amshe Besadis, it's only the people in the fields. Maitama Mishum Da Anisa B'Melacha, it's because they are forced to skip the tefillah because they're busy at work. Avol Be'ir, but the people who are in the city and they can come to shul, Loi, they cannot rely on the Shliach Tzibur representing them, they have to come and daven on their own. Hadron Aloch Yom Tov B'Siyata Dishmai, we finished the fourth perek of Masechet Rosh Hashanah, or Slika Lo Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and we finished Masechet Rosh Hashanah. In Mirat Hashem, we're going to Chaza and review this last perek and the entire Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and in Mirat Hashem in the next shir, we're going to start Masechet Tainis.